Shall we start maybe with what, and I appreciate what Paul said,
right.
The kicking the can. So what? And they're talking about, stopgap spending bill after stopgap spending bill. The conservatives are saying, no, let's stop it and let's just pass our bill. What's going on?
Well, they constantly say that, but they end up capitulating and kicking the can. They've been doing it for 10 years. Let's just look at the last year. On November 30, the net debt of the United States was $20.4 trillion. Up $900 billion since the previous November 30. Now here we are into the 8th year of a business expansion recovery, so-called, and we're running a deficit of more than 4% of GDP, $900 billion a year, and they have no ability to even run the government for more than 2 weeks at a time. No one has addressed entitlements. Defense spending is out of control, and now they're going to lay on top of that this massive tax cut, which can't be afforded and is essentially going to do nothing good for the economy except add to the national debt, upwards of $1.5 trillion over the next 4 or 5 years.
Well, and of course, when you harken back over the trend we've been on, Republicans have been in the control of the House and Senate for a while, but Democrats, of course, have played some part in this. I don't want to get into that so much. One of your recent blogs, the Contra Corner, does a terrific job of looking at the tax plan and how the vast majority of this cut, this corporate tax cut of 20%, is going to account for the increase in the deficit. In a nutshell, we can't go through all the first 3 pages, but do the math for us. It's stunning.
Well, the math is in the 5 years from fiscal 19 to 24. That's the heart of this tax bill impact. It will add $1.4 trillion to the national debt, and almost all of that on the margin will come from the corporate rate cut and the pass-through cut. The issue is, will that stimulate growth or simply more stock buybacks, more dividends, more return on capital? I say overwhelmingly, it's going to be more dividends, more stock buybacks, more financial engineering, because we already have the lowest cost of capital in recorded history. And if businesses really wanted to invest in the domestic economy, there's nothing standing in their way. But what have they been doing for the last 5, 6 years? Massive stock buybacks, massive M&A deals, dividends, in some cases, with borrowed money. So I think the problem is not the IRS, the problem is the Fed and financial repression and the fact that they've made debt and capital so cheap and speculation so lucrative that the system isn't working anymore. And if you simply lay a tax cut on top of that, it's only going to give you more of the same. I
have to have at least one question on the Mueller investigation, and I have to tell our viewers that you have done like this 10-page piece they can find at Contra Corner, and basically you're saying that Russiagate at least for the Flynn part of it, has been cooked up intentionally by those at the FBI, what do you call it, the deep inside?
Yeah, the deep state. Yeah.
The deep state who are anti-Trump. Now, it's not too surprising to find someone who's anti-Trump, but would they really, because I don't know, what did they do? And it sounds like almost what they're doing is illegal.
Well, I think it was a giant, the deal on Flynn was a giant perjury trap. They had the transcript because NASA, NSA, National Security Agency, does record every conversation with a Russian ambassador. So they knew there was nothing in that conversation that was illegal, that reached back to the campaign, that had anything to do with collusion. It was all about, one, the resolution on Israel, and second, the new sanctions, which I think were a big mistake, and what the Trump administration might be thinking going forward. That's what national security advisors do when they talk to the ambassadors from major foreign countries. So why did they then charge into the White House 4 days after the inauguration and demand, without even notifying Flynn, that to have an interview about the content of tapes that they'd already read? The answer was an I gotcha thing. They were trying to get him to contradict himself or to say something at variance with what was on the tapes, so they would have a perjury case so they could come after him and then continue the process of trying to unravel this election. Russiagate, in my view, is simply, an attempt to relitigate the last election. It's a giant witch hunt. The evidence that there was anything material that happened that affected our election is non-existent. The only things that made any sense were the, DNC hack. And I think it's pretty well proven if they had the evidence, they ought to put it out, and they don't have the evidence, and I think this is just a terrible thing.
I want to let Paul jump in here, too, again. However, I just want to remind our listeners that you are not a Trump fan.
Yeah, well, David, I hesitate to dive too deeply down this rabbit hole, but I do ask myself, if the conversation between Flynn and Kislak was so benign, why lie about it? Why did the president then tweet that he knew Flynn lied? Why is Michael Flynn texting a former business partner that the nuclear deal in the Middle East with the Russians is good to go? Surely if Watergate taught us anything, it's that if you see smoke, you should probably go looking for fire.
Well, I don't think so. I don't know why he lied about it. I think he's stupid. It was a giant mistake. It's pretty clear from the Mueller document, from the indictment document, that there was nothing in there except policy content. There was nothing untoward about it. And there was no reason for that interview except to trap the man as part of an effort to get at Trump. And as Kathleen just said, I'm no Trump fan, but I can see a big political witch hunt when it happens. This isn't the 17 intelligence agencies presenting hard proof that there was any Russian meddling. This is John Brennan, the former head of the CIA, an insider, Obama partisan, who was trying to explain how Hillary lost the election to the worst candidate in history, Donald Trump.
Well, I want you to take this further because we're looking at the tax cut plan, which you explain is mostly most of the cost is
for corporations.
Right. It's not going to create jobs. It's not going to create investment. Donald Trump seems to be pretty convinced that this is one of the things that's going to get him reelected. How is this going to play out? You brought Michael Flynn to the table. You're not a Trump fan. We've got this plan. A lot of people are concerned, and not just analysts, but regular people in this country, if they pay attention, oh boy, if there's a big deficit, they'll come back and say, in fact, they're already talking about cutting Medicare and Social Security. Where does this go politically?
Well, I think it goes to a massive fiscal crisis. If they actually manage to enact this bill, they're going to have the deficit at $1 trillion a year or more every year as far as the eye can see. We're already into the third longest business expansion in history. If you look at the facts, you will see that they're planning to borrow $7 trillion, $5.5 that's there, another $1.5 trillion that they're adding in the period between fiscal 2019 and 2024, which is month 114 to month 180 of a business expansion. And the reason I mention that, it sounds like a little obscure, it's not. We have never been there before. In all of recorded U.S. history, there's never been a business expansion that long. And they're going to add $7 trillion to the national debt, which is already heading towards 30 trillion during that period. It makes no sense. There is going to be a rip-roaring fiscal crisis, and we're going to have huge political troubles in this country. And this tax cut is not going to help Trump. It's not going to help the Republicans. It's not going to help the economy. It is simply going to accelerate the time when we run into this massive crisis.